I had work to do.
We live.
Okay, I still don't see myself.
We see
All
you.
right, now I do. Jesus. Are we live?
Talk to me, Cleveland.
Talk to me, Cleveland. Good Lord. Okay, let's hey, everybody. It's been I don't even got my correct lighting. This is nuts. Anyway. We've had some technical difficulties, everybody, but we charging ahead. We lost our sponsor. I got stuff on the screen that I don't need. Okay, hold on. I'm operating the system. Okay, here we go. Let me catch a breath. Let me get silly. Woosah. Okay. This is what we're doing. We waited long and hard to get this cracking. So we tried and true, we're going to make it happen. You already know who this is. This is Kevin Chilhard. And this show is sponsored by My Cool Solutions, as well as the Reverence Design Team. We had my BFF LaDosha on here. She's gone. She had things to do. She couldn't wait for me to handle my technical difficulties. I didn't want to wait for my technical difficulties. But Shawn worked it through for me. Dr. Janice had to add a new machine. Mary Ellie was kicking in, and we just glad Dr. Cole was still in the building.
And awake.
So what we're doing here, this is part 2. Everybody saw part 1. Man, everybody has commented on the show. The show was fire. We went over Shawn's book, man. My desk right now, please believe it's all disheveled. There's stuff all over here. Where my stuff is at, I do not know. Trust me, I have Shawn's book here. It was on my desk. We moving stuff. What SARS-CoV-2 taught me. I see it over there across the room. But we talked about it last week. We went through lots of information, and it helped a lot of people. A lot of people called me and told me that the information that they got on the show was amazing. So we're going to trudge ahead. We know we're a little late right now, but I have a panel of superstars. Some you already know. One will be new to you. Of course, we have the straw that stirs the drink. My brother, Shawn P., the author of the book. And we have the Chill Talk doctor, Dr. Bonita Cole, who's chipped in so many times for us and validated whatever we were on here talking about. But as a special guest, we have my co-worker, Marielle Luongo, and I tell everybody, right, first of all, did I get the pronunciation of your name correct?
Beautiful, perfect.
All right.
Great.
Everyone who's seen in Cleveland, who's seen me on the billboards, the bus stops. We've had some technical difficulties, everybody. Okay, and everyone has seen the commercial where I'm in the barbershop. Marielle is the one that coordinated all of that. She's at the barbershop saying, you know, chill, let your barber put some lather on your face. And I'm like, my barber's pulling out a real razor. I'm like, we're not doing it that way. But we have Mary Ellie Luongo. First of all, Mary Ellie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm super thankful to be here tonight. Super pumped about it. It was me last week who had the technical difficulties. So your skills, Kevin, we're good. And the Dr. Bonita stays, so that's the important part.
I appreciate that. And Dr. Bonita Cole, how are you doing today?
It's been a long day. I'm tired. But I feel good.
All right. And Shawn, you ready to rock?
Man, I'm ready to go. I believe we're on your My Cool Solutions, right?
God. No, we should be on my YouTube channel. Are we?
We are on your CVTV.
On YouTube or Facebook?
On YouTube.
Okay.
That's no. That's not a problem. No. That's not a problem because that's downloadable, uploadable.
Yeah, Chill Vision Television. So
yeah.
Okay. we're gonna keep going, and we're gonna make sure we send this to where it needs to be.
I got you.
So, Mary Ellie, really quick, talk to us about Guardians, what all you've been through. Tell everybody about the organization. Everyone has seen the commercials that I was on. And if you're in Cleveland, you saw the posters and the billboards. And it's not just me, it's a whole team, a crew of Guardians. Could you really quick explain that to us?
Yeah, so the part that the people don't see is that this project started as a research project. I'm a research person, have been doing it for over 10 years. And I interview over 100 people in the city of Cleveland. All of them were people of color who refused to get the vaccine. And this was over 6 months ago now. And then we took all of this data, put it together, then we did comparables with national data about the resistance of getting the vaccine. And then we came up with a marketing strategy, which after all of those hours and all of those research, we discovered nothing new. People don't trust the system. People only want to get information from people that they know, that they love, that they can recognize, people who live in their neighborhood. And the inference of the next door neighbor was much more powerful than the Dr. Fauci. So that's what we did. And we built a campaign around you guys.
All right. And I know at least the information got out because so many people contacted me off of the commercial, off the billboards. And as I told, and Shawn knows that everybody that saw the commercial didn't just fall in love with it. You know, a lot of times people, they loved it, they hated it, they complained, they felt that I was giving misinformation, something that was going to be harmful to Black people. So I know you guys saw me go through it, and maybe some of the other Guardians go through it, and I know you encouraged us, but I know you guys also probably dealt with some of that same information from people who were hesitant or just plain out weren't going to get it, especially from our community, saying that the motives that we did weren't helpful to our community.
Well, too bad, right? Because the data shows otherwise. When we were doing this research, we learned very early on that Tuskegee was going to be a humongous pain point in the narrative against getting the vaccine. We knew that before even we met you. And we spent a lot of time looking for people, especially people exactly like you, people who have a long legacy of leadership in the community, people who were willing to go in camera and to talk about it, and people who were willing to do the civil work that will involve this campaign. And you remember, we spent a lot of time, before we shoot anything, we spent a lot of time together talking about your views on COVID, testing your knowledge, getting to know your family, getting to know your street, getting to know your neighborhood. And when you drop that very famous line about Tuskegee now, I knew that we got it. I knew that I was powerful enough to stand behind it, even with the consequence of it. And understanding that I don't have to live with the consequence because I'm not the face of it. You are. But it was a message that we can stand behind it because it's true.
Okay. Dr. Cole, and I know you've been hard at work in the actual battlefield dealing with patients. Just from last week, you said something that was shared by Shawn, that was shared by myself, and it kind of grew some legs. Your message about everybody having a date with Omicron. Could you briefly go back over that again and let us know what you said and what you meant by it?
So what I said was I actually got this from somewhere else, but the saying is essentially we're all going to have a date with Omicron or whatever variant that is out at this time, because this is not the last variant we're going to have. We all have a date with Omicron, and you don't want to have your date with Omicron come up and you're not protected by being fully vaccinated with all 3 or 2 boosters if you started off with Johnson & Johnson. So hopefully coronavirus is going to be, hopefully it's better than the flu, because still 80,000 to 100,000 people, at least before the coronavirus pandemic, die from influenza every year. So influenza even is still not a benign thing, but hopefully coronavirus upper respiratory infections won't be so severe as time goes on. And I am predicting that we're probably going to be getting regular vaccinations for coronavirus, like we get the flu shot every fall. And I also predict that we're probably influenza and COVID-19 vaccinations are probably going to be put in the same vaccination so people can get them at the same time at regular intervals, just like we do other vaccines like MMR, that's measles, mumps, and rubella, that goes in one vaccine. There's a vaccine that has vaccinations for hepatitis A and hepatitis B. A lot of the vaccines that we give people in the pediatric age are in multiple vaccines, so it's not so many injections. So the key is to have your armor on when you get exposed to COVID-19, and that armor is the vaccinations, because you can't be perfect in avoiding COVID-19, and life has to go on. You know, sometimes you have to be in less controlled environments, you know, especially if you're trying to take care of family and loved ones and you're living with other people and everybody's life is not, cannot be controlled every second. And so even for someone like me, when am at work, I have on gloves, I have on double mask, I have on a face shield. We're asking people entrance questions, but even as a healthcare worker, we do all we can to protect ourselves, but even I can't be perfect with doing that. And the point is to try and protect. If you don't want to do it for yourself, it's often important to do it for other people, especially if you live with children, if you are taking care of elderly parents, you're living with these people. The key is to have everybody be protected so everybody can have the best thing they can have to prevent getting very ill in the hospital and worse, dying from COVID-19 infection. And the other thing is not just about dying, it's about, you may have heard about long COVID. I have patients now who have had a still shorter breath, having symptoms from COVID-19, and it's going on 2 years now. So COVID-19 doesn't always go away symptomatically just because that 10-day, 14-day isolation period has passed.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cole. And Shawn, before we just ask you for some a few updates from last week before we get into the chapter, I have to do again to remind people that, you know, one of the reasons that we have and we're grateful to have Dr. Benita Cole on here because again, she's hard at work. I know she's tired, and she's really out there in the field, and it's hard on all medical professionals right now. But I just want to remind everybody, we just did, when we said we had a doctor, I'm not talking about like we have a doctor, like we got Dr. Dre. No, she's again, I want to give her credentials. She has a degree in human biology from Stanford and a medical degree from Howard. She also has an MBA. So Dr. Cole, we love her. We appreciate her for always. She's like I said, all shows. She's been hanging in with me back from my old print call and post days. So again, call her, she complains, and then she still shows up. So
Hey, Cleveland.
and she loves Cleveland, but she is not there now. Shawn, before we get into the chapters that we left, because we were getting to the really good chapters, so I knew that we couldn't, it would have went extra long. But since last week, did you have any updates, things you wanted, that you had on your mind that you wanted to talk about, and anything that you said last week? Because so many people commented to me about the show and information that they got from the show. It was incredible. But any updates from last week or additions?
Well, COVID related. I mean, you know, we had our highest infectious date in a long time, that 1.5 million people over that weekend. That was a big deal. But, of course, now that we have working vaccines in the community, hospitalizations and deaths are down among vaccinated people. So the data is there, the studies are there, and the only thing new that's out right now is from, well, it's not new, but it's serious, is how COVID's affecting men. You had a man make a claim yesterday that that erectile dysfunction was prevalent and shrinkage was there due to his COVID infection.
Wow. Okay. Not the vaccine, the infection.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let me tell you something. If that's not a reason for brothers to go make sure they go get go get that vaccine, I don't know. You know what I'm saying. But wow. So and I guess one of the things you hit on, Shawn, that everybody can agree should be the major point of understanding of this whole thing, and that's that all the people, the majority of the people, I think you may said around 98% of the people who have acquired serious illness or death due to COVID are all non-vaccinated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why is that message so hard to get across? I want to ask Marielle, because I know you've been dealing with it, and I've been dealing with that with you. Why is that message seems to be not just simple enough for that to be the reason?
Because they don't believe that message. They believe that we're lying about those numbers. They believe that when we say that number, we are overexposing the cases of COVID to prove our point, right? We go back to the old theories of like, well, my mom went to the hospital for something with blood pressure, and they put her over a COVID case, right? Conspiracy theories. The reason why we're struggling with messaging, besides the fact that we earn the mistrust in the system, but specifically messaging, is because conspiracy theories people are brilliant. They can always find an argument around it. They can move the goalposts. They don't have to be reliable or accountable for any of the new theories that they bring. So when these numbers came out about who is in the hospital, they just simply don't trust us with those numbers. They don't.
Okay, and Dr. Cole, we know Dr. Cole does not deal with, nor do we expect her to deal with conspiracy theories. But of those numbers, and for people who watch this now and will watch it later on, how are you dealing with that information of your patients, of people who are actually getting vaccinated, and the information that you have on people unvaccinated? What is the outcome of those people who end up having serious COVID illness? And you're on mute. You're on mute, Dr. Cole.
Sorry
Okay.
about that. I'm multitasking right now.
Yeah.
So let's first of all say that everybody who wants to be vaccinated in this country at this point has gotten a vaccine. So right now, we're people who are not vaccinated. I am finding it very difficult to encourage them to get vaccinated, because unless they know someone close to them who has not just gotten sick from COVID, but died from COVID, it's not a whole lot I'll put it this way, I'm finding it difficult to convince them to get vaccinated at this point. So I saw 20 patients today and that's not it. And that means physically, either in the office or by video visit. And then obviously lots of messages, which I'm actually dealing with right now. That's why I'm multitasking. And I had 3 people added on to my schedule with COVID, already diagnosed, home testing. I already had 2 or 3 others who were already on the schedule with COVID, having symptoms, trying to recuperate. And most of the people that I'm seeing right now are either unvaccinated or they haven't had their booster. So it's kind of getting almost to the point with this current Omicron that if you don't have your booster, is just a step above of being unvaccinated. For those people who are unvaccinated, I honestly believe they just don't want to get vaccinated. Because when I give them a reason to get vaccinated that they accept, they just give me another reason why they don't want to get vaccinated. And so for those people, I go through about 3 reasons, and after that I stop. I send them a message in the patient portal with all the reasons to get vaccinated, frequently asked questions, and that at that point I leave it alone, because it's kind of like having a discussion with somebody about faith. You can't argue against somebody's faith. You can't argue against something because people believe in something that they can't prove, but you can't disprove it. And so I have kind of pulled back on all those people who I see who are not vaccinated. They're just, unfortunately, it's very few of those people that I have been able to change their mind.
Well,
And that's where we want to step in. Sorry to interrupt.
no, that's fine, because what I'm saying is, for those people, and it's disheartening to hear, because it's one thing for somebody to tell me that the information that I'm giving them about the vaccine and the unvaccinated. It's one thing for them to tell me that they don't believe me, but to tell a medical doctor that they don't believe them is a real problem. And I think part of that problem, and Mary Ellie and I, we deal with that, and it's because something we're going to get into right now with Shawn is that we have to deal with myth and hoax and conspiracy theories is very powerful. And I want to ask Shawn, before he officially starts off, why are the myth and the conspiracy theories so powerful, even to people who we previously had assumed were critical thinkers?
It's an scapegoat built around a lack of intelligence. But you have to think about it. This anti-vaccine movement originated from a religious perspective, as this is God's way of cursing the world or controlling the population, or what have we, and it transcended into something other than that. So it comes back down to a lack of knowing or not knowing when things are being promoted. And I'm saying promoted because they tactically promote misinformation to confuse and create distrust among people. There's like Dale Bigtree, for instance, was recorded in a conference saying that whether it works or not, we need to create chaos and confusion. This is coming from the number 2 man in the anti-vaccine movement, who also said that, I'm not going to vaccinate my child against the measles. I'm going to introduce measles to my child, and we're going to let nature take its course, no matter how deadly it may be. Polio, the same way. So,
and I want to ask Dr. Cole, something about why have we what her thought on her opinion on why we have become untrusting of our healthcare providers and our healthcare experts, like Dr. Fauci. But real quick, Shawn, one of the other things that stood out, that was one of the big points that people are commenting on from the last show, is when they wanted to ask Dr. Ko, did she know Rizza Islam? And her response was, I know Rizza from the Wu-Tang Clan. Everybody kind of laughed at that and thought it was kind of cool that Dr. Ko, first of all, knew Rizza from the Wu-Tang Clan. But Dr. Ko, even when we see Dr. Fauci get on television, give us this information, I'm watching. I talked to Marilyn one time. She was calling me. I'm like, I can't talk now. I'm watching this Dr. Fauci documentary. She like, what? I'm like, no, Marilyn, this is I'm real with this. I'm committed to this. But why is it, have we even gotten to that point when the nation's quote unquote number one infectious disease expert, where he has become a lightning rod for just general people not believing him? Like, from the medical community, how does that make you feel?
Well, I have heard of medical professionals who are kind of at odds with what he says, but not a whole lot. What people don't know is that any doctor that's around my age or a little bit younger went through HIV with Dr. Fauci. And what the general public does not know is that Dr. Fauci and the NIH and the colleagues they collaborate with all over the world got us through HIV. That was a horrific point in taking care of patients. That it's a horrific infection to not have anything to give these people. And like I may have mentioned before, HIV is very difficult to develop a vaccine against because the virus attacks the very immune system that you need for the vaccine to work to mount an immune response. So I would say that a lot of medical professionals have a lot of respect for Dr. Fauci because they got us through it, keeping up with what NIH is saying, the drugs, and now HIV has become a chronic infection that you hardly see anybody die from anymore because the medications and the treatments have gotten so much better over the last 20 years. And so I have a hard time listening to Dr. Fauci and not for lack of a better term, trusting what he's saying, is because we've gone through this with Dr. Fauci before, and other pandemics and other epidemics and other infections. Dr. Fauci has been a great leader for us, because just like now, when you have a new infection, you don't know much about it, where I work, we're getting daily emails, daily changes, we're changing what we're telling people every day. And I think a lot of the lay public is not comfortable with that. But when the science changes, the advice has to change. And that's how it's going to be for a long time. So basically, the general public is just now meeting Dr. Fauci, but we've been down many roads with Dr. Fauci before, and he gets us through it. And that's basically how I look at it. And the main thing is he got us through, and I will say through HIV. And it's just horrible to watch people be ill and die, and there's nothing that you can do for it. Now, so I think people who have issues, the general public, people who have issues with Dr. Fauci, is for the same reasons that I have said before. They don't like doctors. They don't trust doctors. They've had bad experiences. They have all kind of reasons. I have people who won't get the COVID-19 vaccine because they say, "Well, I just don't like needles." So people get fixated on one thing in their mind, and you can't shake them. So anything that counters what's in their mind, they're going to disagree with it, whether it makes scientific sense or not.
Okay.
This is exactly what we found in research. When last summer, when we interviewed all of these people, we ended up categorizing them in 3 ways, 3 personas. The first one was the category of people who want the shot, who could not get it, right? Remember back in the day when we had to drive 12 hours and make appointments in another state to get it? It was an accessibility thing, right? If you were a single mom in the city of Cleveland, getting the shot for you and your family was very, very expensive, in between taking time off and making the lines and looking for it. Then it was the wait and see category, people who were not completely denials, but they were like, well, it's too early. Let me wait and see. And then the last category was the hardcore, what we call the new anti-vaxxer, which is what we're dealing with it now. What Dr. Cole say about you cannot fight it because it's almost fate, that's what we do messaging like we do. So much faith-based and so much far away from the scientific data, because it doesn't matter to change the minds of who we're dealing with right now.
Okay, Shawn, let's go into it. And Dr. Cole, as long as you want to hang with us, you can. But Shawn, let's go into your chapter of the book that deals with myths and pseudoscience, and because so many of the things that we heard early on, and you know the list. The computer chips, the tracking chips, I don't even want to go. Shawn, take us into why you included that chapter in the book, and why'd you wait till you get to the end of the book to drop that one in there near the bottom of the book? You done make us read to get to that part. Talk to us about what was going through your mind, why you included that chapter, and how you went into creating that information.
Well, I'm gonna work backwards. So it's positioned there strategically because you needed to know about viruses, the immune system, how viruses operate, the vaccine science. You needed to know all the evidence, the information, what we have, what we can stand on, show, improve, and demonstrate. And the lessons, you needed the lessons in those things first. So now that when you get to the myths and the pseudoisms, you can recognize, point them out, and properly understand, right, how to address those things immediately. So it was pretty much intentional. Now, it was included due to the climate. Right? We got Dr. Cole on the panel. I always say this about Dr. Cole. She's frontline in the fight. She ain't got time to deal with the silliness. That's where, I come in at. I got time for the silliness. You know what I mean? So when you're agitating the doctors and the frontline workers who are trying to get us through a pandemic, I don't think people understood the severity of it. We had 2 pandemics, right? We had a virus that was present and running rampant, and then we had an ignorance pandemic, right? So we got to let the doctors fight the serious fight while we deal with the ignorance of others. Now, I'm not internationally known or anything like that, but I do pay attention to which direction the wind blows and how that can impact the lives of other people. You have to think about it. Had we been able to curb misinformation earlier, right? Like with these myths earlier, we don't have the millions of people fall into that category to where they just don't want to get it based off what they hear. You know what I mean? TikTok doesn't prevail. YouTube, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram doesn't prevail. Your 140 characters doesn't weigh more than a doctor's perspective on if you should be vaccinated or not. That doesn't prevail. So the climate, and then once you start seeing the scientists and the doctors get involved in curbing misinformation, and even dealing with misinformation among their peers and, you know, people at the nursing level and below, when that start happening, that lets you know the severity of the problem, because A, we're in a pandemic. B, is taking hundreds of thousands of lives in the US, but millions across the world. And C, this misinformation can get you killed.
Right. And I do want to just remind, because while I didn't get a chance, and because we dealt with the technical difficulties, I didn't do all the introductions that I meant to do in introducing Shawn. Anybody who's watching this right now, again, I'll say it, do yourself a favor and make your way to his YouTube program, Science with Shawn. Mariella, you might recall when I did that little rap that we used, and I had a verse in there that said something about it's on. I've seen every episode of Science with Shawn. This is Shawn from Science with Shawn. So we and again, and Dr. Cole actually congratulated. She has Shawn's book, and she congratulated him specifically on how he sourced the information that he has in his book. He's not just, you know, giving information. He's actually presenting where he got that information from that people can go and check. And Dr. Cole was congratulatory of Shawn, especially for that. But take us into we understand the severity of the battle that we're dealing with on a non-scientific literacy fight. So as you go in, you set the stage in the previous chapters. So work us into how you arrived at what you were going to deal with in that chapter about myths and the other pseudoisms.
All right, so pretty much the stage was set due to the influx of misinformation that was running rampant, even in conversations that we had on Chill Talk, even among Dr. Cole in her presentations and trying to inform the people of the severity of the situation. Even, you know, on another platform, having conversations with supposedly doctors, but they end up being something else, titled something else, but they wanted to sound smart. And then they try to trick us with the you know, different verbiage into making us think certain things about the cytokines and so forth. And, you know, I don't want to pretty much bring that up, but
right, the cytokine storms and the ribosomal misreads.
Ribosomal misreads, right? So we get into that, and people think because they, you know, studied and they did some things, that the layman isn't paying attention to the same information that the medical field and the scientists are studying and researching. So, you know, we had to take on those conversations and have them and show the difference between what misinformation looks like and what the science is saying and projecting, and forcing people to either go back and read and understand or comprehend, or, you know, or they can continue on their way. But the dirty dozen, which is mentioned in this chapter, which consists of 12 individuals who are very strategic at how they position misinformation. To be honest, Dr. Cole is not familiar with one of these particular people, but he's the guinea pig for Robert Kennedy Jr. and Dale Bigtree. He uses the talking points of the other members of the Dirty Dozen, whether it be the magnets on the arms, 5G, play the governmental plays like the government's trying to kill you. And then this is a good one where they try to say that the doctors are creating fear, and then they turn around and tell you that the government is trying to kill you with this vaccine. And no one seems to think about their logic, and what they're saying is just convincing because they use past history that they don't understand and conflate it with current history. And all the while, people don't realize that it was good science that exposed bad science, right? And the integrity of science was on the line. So the integrity had to be in play in order for things to come forward. And this has been the most transparent process in human history, from the creation of the vaccine to all the studies. We can't go back in time and gain access, literally access, to all the studies that were held and controlled in any other situation. This whole pandemic has been an open access from all the major journals, from all the cited sources that doctors collaborate with across the board, no matter where it was, from the most prestigious universities all the way down to the lower level. And then on top of that, they masked it. They didn't cover it up. They said, here, read it. But they didn't show us how to read it. And because they didn't show us how to read it, people didn't read it. Well, I didn't care. I read it. And so it's kind of easy to deal with the people in the book that we talk about that that were controlling the narrative and still are controlling the narrative to this day. But
Shawn, just real quick, and I'm gonna let you get back to that. But you made a point, and because we have Dr. Cole here, the point that you made about all this information is out. We probably isn't any other time that we have received this much information about a virus or a vaccine. And one of the main things where people were hesitant was because they were saying, you don't know what's in the vaccine. We don't know what's in the vaccine. And so you left, Shawn, because you know that if you really, really cared to know, you could find out what was in the vaccine. Now, if you read the actual ingredients of the vaccine, it might have been a problem, because we're seeing words that we're not used to seeing for things that are simple. And so when we have Dr. Cole on the show, she went through this and was asked what were the basic components of the vaccine. Dr. Cole said what?
Salt, sugars, fats, lipid nanoparticle.
Is that was the basic components that you let everybody know that was in the vaccine?
Basics.
It's three things: fat, sugar, and the mRNA for the Pfizer Moderna vaccine.
And right, and the salt. So, and then my question
was, well, inside is polyethylene glycol, which is a big sugar. It's the same thing like with this Miralax. You take it to pull water into the coat. When you drink polyethylene glycol or Miralax, you drink it to pull water into the fluid in your colon so you can poop.
The PEG, that's we see it on there. We know it.
Right. So, I believe Shawn, you can correct me, but the polyethylene glycol, that I believe was a stabilizing agent to put in there because it has to be frozen. And then the fat encircling the vaccine particle was used to allow that the vaccine to enter your cell and put the mRNA in the outside of the cell, not in the nucleus. It doesn't change your DNA, but it gets the mRNA into the cells so your body can use the mRNA to make the spike protein to mount an immune to so you can make so your body can make the antibodies to that protein to protect yourself when you see the real virus. So it's just three simple components. Now I did have a patient, I've had one patient so far who's has a true allergy to polyethylene glycol. So she couldn't take the Pfizer Moderna vaccine, but she could take Johnson and Johnson because it has a different component.
So, and this is the thing about Shawn, and I noticed for a fact, as he goes through these journals, and I'm gonna give it back to him again unless Mary Ellie wants to say something real quick. But as Shawn goes through these journals, when he comes across information like what is included in the vaccines, and he sees these words or any other thing, he may not know them at the time. But guess what? Shawn goes in and will find out what those things are and then distribute that information to everybody, but will also send whoever is listening or reading, sends them the information where they can go back and they can find it. And these brothers, and I'm props to Shawn and Brother Ankh, they give lessons on how to look at studies and understand what parts you need to pay attention to specifically to get what you're looking at. Even to the point where they say, if you just want to skip down to the summary to see that information. But Shawn, go ahead and talk about your process and how you deal with myths. Unless Marielle, I see you're on mic. So you wanted to say something?
No, I'm looking forward to what Shawn has to say.
Okay.
The process is simple. So first, you always have to ask a question, no matter what it is. So if you're trying to get an answer to what it is you need to know, you need to make sure that you're asking the proper question. So if the question is what's in the vaccines, right? Then the first thing that you have to do is you have to go to where would they publish the ingredients to this vaccine first. Right? They made it available in the FDA, EUA documents and other documents that the FDA sent out. Secondly, when you get to what it is, these big words you're not going to understand. It is going to be a really big word, but it would just mean salt or sugar or fats or lipid nanoparticle. You all you have to do then is highlight the word and search the word and look for the simplest form of that word. We're not trying to be the experts where we could just look at something and say, bam, we know what it is. We need to simplify it. If you can't find the word, I guarantee you, YouTube is going to have somebody on there that's going to tell you what that word means. Then you could understand, okay, so all of this just to say salts. All of this just to say sugars, all of this to say this is the creation of something to help it contract it to get to the cell, right? So now you understand that in basic terms, these things are that. Now you can do yourself you could do yourself one further by going and trying to investigate further. Has any of these ingredients, based on the amount, been harmful to the body or anything like that? You want to do that too. Why? Because you don't want to be biased in your search. You don't want to look for something that will support your bias. You want to go and look to falsify what's in front of you, because that's what science is requiring you to do, to falsify something. So you need to know, and then you need to know how to do that. Now, when you go in there to try to falsify, you're literally looking for information that would go against that. And people would say, well, this shows up in something else because there was an argument about a particular ingredient that showed up in something else. but the different levels of the ingredient made the difference in what was in the substitute of whatever it is they was trying to argue against versus what was in the vaccine.
For instance, Shawn, when people even in regular MMR vaccine, there was a big thing about mercury being
right.
And I've seen, you and several other people break down how much mercury that actually is.
Correct.
No, go ahead on that, Shawn, real quick.
So when you're looking at the measurements, right? That macro, micro, whatever, you know what I'm saying? When you get all the way down to that, you can't even see that. You know what I mean? Your intake of other ingredients that's in cereal are way higher than what it would be in a vaccine. So you have to really understand that. When you're looking at milliliters and all of those, like microliters, when you're dealing with those things, people don't understand that. They don't understand that. Listen, they're telling you how much of something is in something. Too much of something, anything, will be harmful to the human body. I could drink too much water too fast, right? And something could happen to me. I can ingest some particular type, too much of one particular food or something like that, and I can have issues with that, but nobody argues with that. You sit there and eat so much pizza in one day, something gonna happen. You're gonna be on the toilet. You know what I'm saying? Your body is just not going to take that, but people don't know those things, and then they try to use that as an argument. So now you eliminate that to understand, okay, I get that. And then you just elevate your research into another level until you get to a point to where you can understand. Now you can move off the ingredients and deal with the other things that will come up next based on the way that people want to position their arguments. But it all starts with a question. And if you don't know how to answer that particular question, then, you're handicapped, but you're going to rely on something. And if it's misinformation, then you're never going to get to the truth.
Shawn, you guys have also done an excellent job of showing, not only do you do it, but you've shown people how to even get through Wikipedia with some success. I mean, there was a lot of time where people were very critical of Wikipedia for a reason, but you guys have been able to actually use Wikipedia as a tool and have given people lessons on how to get information from Wikipedia that is digestible, that you can actually go and research.
Yeah, so with the wiki thing is easy. I don't recall time in history, especially in the 80s, when people had Encyclopedia Britannica, that they were calling it incorrect information in the Encyclopedia Britannica. You go in people's houses and they have these 2-volume sets of 32 books, right? And these big old books got all this information in there. You just pull one out and you go look for whatever it is that you're researching, and boom, you get it. That's what Wikipedia is. It's an information at your fingertips. It's not like the big books. It's just been converted to an online version. However, in looking at Wikipedia, all that information has to have a source. So once I have identified paragraph 1 and it has a source, you can click on that number. It'll take you down at the bottom of Wikipedia, and it'll show you where it originally come from, whether it's a book or another computer link source. You can click on it, find the ISBN if it's a book, or if it's a link, then it's going to take you to the site host where that information comes from. And then you can cross-reference that information or review that information to make sure that it aligns with the Wikipedia article. Because we always say you can start on Wiki, but end in a journal or a book. Because 9 times out of 10, that's where it's going to take you, is where the actual science is sufficient.
All right, let's go, Shawn, with the myths and how you deal with them.
All right, so let's deal with 5G, right? At the earliest onset, before a vaccine was even rolled out, they were in trials. Something has to come from somewhere. Whole 5G thing, right? So the first thing that you want to do is, where does this information come from? It's been regurgitated on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, you don't know the source, right? So you got to hunker down on where is the source, who is the source for the claim. Once you have identified the source, right, then you need to go look up them. When you look the source up of the claim, you're going to find out that there are other claims that have been made by this particular source that ended up being incorrect. And what is the reason for them to do that? Some of these sources are people who have either lost medical license and practices and have deviated into other fields and are now trying to get back at the medical field or practice in which they left. And so there's anger. Some of them are people whose research was rejected by the scientific community and not accepted. And it was scrutinized and, pushed back to them. And they felt wholeheartedly about this being correct. And then next thing you know, you go and you look at the study and the science was all bad. And they just was dealing with an assumption. Others are people who regurgitate other people's information to cause the confusion. This is what I said earlier. So this is where you get a person like a Riza Islam, right? He's a proponent of the 10 pennies, who's responsible for misinformation and the Dell big trees and so on and so forth. They take a scientific study and pull apart the information that they can twist into their benefit and then present it to people to say, see, it says this here, but they never give you the context of the study in which the information stresses a stronger point. And you have to know how to extract that and deal with what the science actually says versus who is saying it.
Okay, and really quick, and I've used this example before, but when we saw, and I don't know, and a lot of people saw this and it scared them to death, where they didn't want to take the vaccine. When the nurse, your neighbor from Keisha from Nashville.
Yeah,
and you're from Nashville. But
yep.
This was, I saw it. Everybody was showing it to me. Look at this, Chill.
Mm-hmm.
The nurse from Nashville was on TikTok or YouTube or whatever she appeared on, crying because she had facial paralysis. Not Guillain-Barré, Bell's palsy.
Bell's palsy.
She was crying and she appeared to have, the facial paralysis, and she was crying. It was heartbreaking. And she was a nurse and said, look what the vaccine did to me. And I was like, oh my God, we got a problem. And before I started to try to go and investigate, I said, you know what? I'm going to do my shortcut right now. I'm just going to see if Shawn already on it. And he was. So when you see something like that, Shawn, and you broke this all the way down, talk to me a little bit about what we should think about when we see something like that.
Yeah, so the first thing that popped up into my head is, okay, what is the claim? Who's making the claim? So this is right around the time where frontline workers were being vaccinated. And we knew that a small percentage of the trial participants, there was one instance or maybe two instances of Bell's palsy where it lasted for like a couple of days and then it corrected itself. And so you would have to first be familiar with Bell's palsy, how it works, and the severity of it, right, as a whole. So once you've understood that, then you have to deal with, again, I'm telling you, the claim. Who's making the claim? The lady in the video said that she was a nurse in Nashville, Tennessee, and her name. So she gave you her name, which was crazy. She gave you her occupation and then the city and state. Well, to be honest, most people don't think to go and validate the claimant. but I did. So I proceeded to look up the Tennessee Registry Board of Nursing, or whatever it's called in particular. And in there, if you know where to look, you could enter in that person's name, and you can see if this person was ever a practicing nurse, if they renewed their licenses, how many times they renewed their licenses with the state, and what type of nurse that they are. Then you go back and you deal with, why is this showing up on YouTube? So now you have to look at where that information was coming from. Not only was this lady on a YouTube recording, but this was a dark horse website, meaning that it would contract back to some misinformation stuff that was on the dark side of things that wasn't probably going to last on YouTube long. But the point of all of that is, as soon as you identify the claimant and you can verify the claimant's name, with state, and so forth, you go and verify that information. Well, come to find out, she was never a nurse, right? So, through that research, then I hit up Malcolm, who is a nurse also, but he's a nurse in Memphis. And I wanted to make sure that I had the right information on before I said anything. So I hit Malcolm. Malcolm was like, yeah, bro, I looked her up too. She's not a practicing nurse. Name doesn't come up, anything like that. So wild goose chase. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was nursing, the mentally challenged, or, the elderly, and she was just, in that fit. No, all of that has to be accounted for. It has to be accounted for. And so we eliminated that. So now that you've eliminated her being a nurse, how could she have gotten the vaccine and even have the slightest reaction?
Right, because that was at a time where only medical frontline people were getting vaccine. They hadn't come to us yet.
Yep.
So Shawn, so basically, not only was she not a nurse, we didn't even know if she actually got vaccinated. We didn't even know if she actually had
no card.
We knew absolutely zero, could confirm zero about this woman, but this video went around the country like wildfire, and people were reacting to, oh my God, look what the vaccine did to this lady's face. We told you that something was wrong with this, and they did it too fast. But before I could even go in on it, Shawn, that I figured because she said she was from Nashville, Shawn was go already.
Man, she could have been from Philadelphia, bro. I would have did the same thing. Every state has this a similar database to be able to verify. Because if I'm looking for a doctor, right, and the doctors are going to have nurses, and this is my primary care physician, if I'm going to do those things, I have to do my due diligence to see the credentials of the people in that building. And I can look up whoever, wherever, however, and extract that information. So if you're in the medical field, and everybody in the medical field knows that people can access to know, you know what I mean? Which goes back to one of the other misinformation pushers, Rashid Butter, who was I'm a doctor. But no, you're not a practicing doctor. Your license was revoked a long time ago. You was actually kicked out of that particular practice. And now you have some little private study that you're perpetrating as, doctor's work. So you deal with those people like that, and you meet them where they are. We need to know who we're dealing with. And once we establish that point, then we can proceed forward. You know what I mean? Like Sherry Tenpenny, like literally, she went through medical school. She's done all of these trainings. You can see who she is, where she is, but she makes $14 million pushing misinformation, more than her medical practice.
Right, which is kind of, and not that Wakefield, Dr. Wakefield got $14 million from the MMR autism connection, but that's an example of
Mhm.
an actual doctor not only spreading misinformation, but publishing misinformation. But I wanted to ask Dr. Cole, how frustrating is that when people point to now obviously once we got into the millions of people who did get vaccinated, obviously in the general population, people do get Bell's palsy regardless of so once we get to millions of people have been vaccinated, those millions of people are going to have different ailments or diseases that are common in that number of people. But how frustrating is that to see actual ailments inside of the vaccinated community be put on the vaccination as opposed to things that happen to people in that large of a population regardless.
Um, like I said, sometimes when people just don't want to get a vaccination, they kind of hang on those things without looking at it the way you just said. Sometimes it's hard for people to imagine millions and millions of people getting a vaccine worldwide and looking at percentages about how many people, what percentage of those people vaccinated had what we call an adverse event or an adverse reaction. And, my first response is if you get Bell's palsy, you're still alive. Um, but that's still a judgment call on my part because not everybody I can't tell somebody whether living with Bell's palsy or dying is is a better choice. Everybody has to decide what choice they want to make for themselves in life. So even if I do say that to a patient, I do say to myself that person still has to decide what's important, risking having a small chance of Bell's palsy, which you can get with lots of different vaccines. In fact, most of the we don't know what really causes Bell's palsy, and most people, and for a lot of people, we think it's viruses themselves that cause Bell's palsy. Um, Bell's palsy is not a big side effect of vaccines. There's other things that vaccines cause more um, than Bell's palsy. But like I said, when somebody just doesn't want to get it, they will hang on anything to give themselves a reason not to get the vaccine. And so trying to explain it scientifically, for me, I just don't get anywhere with that. And so I don't push the issue.
Right. Well, and I
If
wanted to
they
put,
give me a reason why they don't want to get the vaccine, for example, I have a patient who she was really specific. She wanted the Johnson and Johnson vaccine instead of Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, and I was trying to explain to her the benefits of the mRNA vaccine versus the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. And I have seen her a couple times since then, and I didn't bring it up that actually the Johnson Johnson vaccine actually didn't pan out to be as good as the other two. It may not be as good as the other ones that are coming down the pike. So, at that point, I'm not going to say I told you so, but I said it to myself. It's just hard to get people around that curve, and those patients, I just say, call me when you need me.
I wanted to talk to Marielle real quick, and Shawn, you can appreciate this because you watched this discussion that I had with this gentleman. You watched it, Unc watched it, and I believe you all did a show on the conversation that I had with him. I this that whole meeting was arranged because this was somebody that Mary Ellie had spoken to. And how long ago was that, Mary Ellie? That was a while ago.
Yeah, that was like 6 months ago.
Okay, but and I wanted to say, Shawn, when I asked him, he basically said he didn't know anyone, not who died from COVID, who even had COVID at that time. And I was anxious to find out, okay, now that we know a million people, not a million, but we know several people who have had it, had he changed his mind based on other things, and the information, I guess Mary Ellie basically was like, not only no, but hell no.
Yeah, at first I feel so validated by Dr. Ko. Like everything that she was saying is exactly what the research has found. So I love to have a doctor validating my work. It's all about the relationship that you have with authority before COVID. So when you guys were talking about the nurse and all of these things and what you guys did, is because you saw the red flags. Your instinct was, this don't smell good. Is something fishy here? Let me dig for it. You know, we see people in terrible relationships and we're like, why do they still together? Don't you see all these red flags, right? How is not obvious for you that is a problem here? Because people see what they can be comforted by. That's the first default of knowledge. What will comfort me? What will let me sleep tonight? What I can learn on it. And the relationship that we have with authority is it's different for everyone. And those who their decision was to have faith in the contradictorian behavior, which is what we're seeing now with the anti-vaxxers, that's truthfully their belief system at core. It's nothing that ever will be said by authority that just by the source will be trustworthy, right? When Shawn was explaining his process to find information and their sources, they will make the argument that they're feeding him these sources, that he's finding what they want him to find. It's never going to be a logical argument to win over this. It's just not.
Shawn?
She's correct. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, right, but and to follow up, you saw that discussion, and that's not just common to that brother. I'm sure that we've all talked to people who take that same anti-establishment viewpoint and can always say whatever information that we have, whatever data that we have, whatever facts or sources that we have is tainted.
Correct.
By some type of conspiracy.
Yeah. So you trust them. You trust them to do this. You trust them to do that. So you align yourself with them. No, the smart people will always tell you, even the scientists, the virologists, the epidemiologists, the immunologists, the doctors, everybody. People make mistakes. People are human. So you don't trust the person. You trust the science. All right. What does the science say? Because you have to think about the field and what we're talking about. The job is to falsify the conclusion. So if whatever the results were, you have teams of people all over the world that get this data, and they go in and they try to scrutinize that data. That's how you elevate that work. We don't get to a vaccine without scrutiny. Has to be. And what people fail to realize is earlier in the pandemic, science was releasing so much information that they released information and then took it away. They had information regarding how the vaccine earlier on in its animal trial testings, and even in their first human test, they didn't have any success. They had to tweak something with the messenger. They had found an issue. And I just so happened to be looking that day and said, whoa, hold on, here goes a study. Boom, this was made available. And then a week later, they corrected whatever it was that needed to be corrected. And then they went right back to testing and then published their findings about 30 days after that. And then so it corrected itself. This is why I always said that this pandemic was our first opportunity to actually see how science works. It exposed every level of how this field of study, comes to be. And how do we get to that end game, that conclusion? And but with people with information and perspectives and positions and all of that, it goes back to their understanding of basically what I just said. They think that we really want to entrust our lives into people's own mouths. No, that's not. So you're gonna not take the advice of Dr. Cole, and you're gonna take the advice of Riza Islam, like seriously. And then you're gonna label Dr. Cole working for the government, and she's just one of them. How? You never met her. Have you had a conversation with her? Do you know where her heart is or what her passion is? Like, you know nothing about her. You don't know where she studied, where she went to school, what her aspirations and dreams are. You don't know nothing. But you're going to discount her for another person that you never met, that you don't know what their angle is. Are they profiting off of it? Right? What's going on with that? You never look at that. Like, this other person has an agenda, right? Your doctor is trying to save your life. What are we doing here? So when they come up with the hurdles and things of that nature, and that conversation that you had with that brother, we had to slow it down and pay attention to how he was responding to what you were saying. And you could see he lacked critical thinking skills. You could also see that he would endanger, he looks to be endangered mentally, like he would expose himself to situations and scenarios that would jeopardize potentially the lives of others as well as himself, right? Like, you was too close to him. Like, for real. And because he played the game that he didn't know anyone, right? I don't take that serious. I think he knows someone and the severity of what had transpired, but those people, he just didn't want to succumb to that. Like, he couldn't understand how you would say certain things, and then he would say whatever he would say, it would make no sense. There was two different minds in that conversation. There was the learned and the unlearned, who had the ability to not even want to learn because he didn't know where to start. And if he did, he still wasn't going to do it because it would impede on whatever he had going on.
And I want to point out something that I usually do, and I do it for a reason, but I feel the ridiculousness of having to do it. And that's how we deal with our experts, especially in the Black community. When I introduce Dr. Cole, I already know that there's going to be two sides of our people in the woke community that are good. So when I say that she has a degree in human biology from Stanford, fantastic school. You get a degree from Stanford, you tip top. But what they're going to say is, okay, she learned that white information. She went to a white college and the white people brainwashed her. And while I personally love doing this, I think it's ridiculous to have to do it, because in Dr. Cole's instance, so not only can I transfer from, she got her degree in human biology from an institution like Stanford, which should be far and above something meaningful and great. And like, okay, she must be tip top. But then I have to go and say,
She ain't got 3 billion followers.
but for her, just for you all woke people, she has her medical degree from one of the blackest colleges, coolest, slickest, Howard. Now, what do you have to say? What do you have to say now?
The Howard is white. That's what they will say. We found
No,
that.
they won't. But see, then
We found that in research so much. We have the theory at the beginning. Okay, what about if Black doctors are the one giving the message? And what we found is exactly what you're saying. This woke community believe that she had to become whiteness to the process to become a physician.
Right,
and
but
there was no other way around it.
Say that she got her medical degree not from a white institution, from Howard University. But I think that's ridiculous that we have to do that. Just the same reason we have to point out that there's people of color all up and down the process of establishing this vaccine. But anyway, Shawn, talk to us about, and let's, Mariella, before I talk to Shawn about pseudoisms, did you have anything to say about the conversation I had with that brother in conclusion of that?
No, but I would love to have the conversation about what this would do culturally to us very soon, right? The burnout of the medical community is not only the physical hours that they have spent doing this, but it's the emotional abuse that they have taken doing this. And I'm sure Dr. Ko will say, it's my pleasure to explain this many times, but deep down, it had to be a resentment to the general public to be questioned so deeply as they have been and have the level of doubt that they have when most of them have devoted their life to saving other lives. And we see that in nurses. Studies are coming about that resentment. And I'm sure it will happen the same thing with physicians. And that's a discussion about mental health and protection of the frontliners that we need to have.
Dr. Ko, do you get burned out from people
challenging? Do you hate them all yet, or do you still want to practice?
Or saying that you've been brainwashed or you're an agent for the government after you busted your ass to get through all forms of education, for them to say you're an agent, you're brainwashed by the authorities?
I've been practicing. I have to be honest, I've been practicing for over 20 years, and it took me a long time to realize that sometimes people cannot be satisfied either way. I'll just give you an example. I've had patients say to me, literally, and then more than one occasion, this is before we had masks on, every visit, why are you so happy? You smile all the time. And it's like, well, what would you say if I came into the room and I wasn't smiling? It's like, some people, you just cannot please them. So so sometimes you get to the point where you say, I try to help as many people as I can. You can't help everybody. Some people have their own little nuances and idiosyncrasies to their personality, and you just can't figure out how to get in there to motivate them for behavior change that's going to help them in the long run. And, it's not that they even have to have anything complicated, but you've seen hundreds of patients just like them. So you know what road they're going to end up on, and you just got to be there when they're ready or not.
All right, Shawn, as we wind this down, pseudoisms is a part of what you're talking about.
Right.
Probably more powerful to the seemingly intellectual people, more so than just a hoax or myth or conspiracy. Sometimes there are conspiracies, but talk about the pseudoisms and the pseudoscience that seem, well, just go ahead and talk to us about what that is and how that plays into this scenario of this pandemic.
Right. So first of all, pseudoscience is short, it's fake science. So let's say we have a study about Johnson and Johnson's vaccine, and that its infectious rate was whatever it was, and some of the side effects was similar to previous vaccines. But in one particular study, you had an adverse effect. It would be listed in the study as AE. So it'd be an adverse effect of an individual who had continuous vomiting or whatever. Let's just say that, and for a day or two, and then on the third day it corrected itself. Pseudoscience pseudoscience would extract that part of the study to make it an emphasis, and they never would tell you the duration of how long those symptoms lasted. And then they'll tell you that this mainly came from the vaccine. But if you kept reading the study, it'll tell you that the symptoms developed some other way that was unrelated to the vaccine. That would never be presented to the people as the totality of information. And then it would be dressed up real pretty, real elegantly, have some nice music, a few good little featurey photos in the background, and it'll hit you in a minute and 40 seconds. And the whole minute and 40 seconds will emphasize someone had thrown up. That's the pseudoscience, where they'll take real science, sauce it up, and present it in a way that would demean what the actual real science is saying. So during this pandemic, there was a lot of that. You have to remember, we're only working with the scientific data that has been published and printed. The people who represent the misinformation have done absolutely zero studies. No research, no field work, no lab work, nothing. So the only thing that they can do is muddy the water with what has been published and what has not been published, or what is the assumption of, and they need a figurehead to attack, i.e. Dr. Fauci, because he's the face of the global pandemic. He's the face of the vaccines. He's the face of all medical science, right? Because he's speaking for the field. So once you have a character, you have a field doing all this work, and all you have to concentrate on is cherry picking a few things, twisting and turning them, and then presenting it to people to have them second guess something. You've done your job. You've done your job. So you found this. You made this twist. You promoted it. Now you can go lecture on it. And you can add stuff to the equation. All figureheads for the anti-vaccine movement have talking points, i.e., the microbiologist that deals with cells, the sister from Minnesota. She came through, did her little lecture during a school hall meeting or whatever the meeting was. She twisted and turned a lot of that misinformation in there. She slid in some autism. She slid in some other things, only to be in pictures when I researched her, only to be in pictures with Dale Bigtree and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And she's a microbiologist. Her concentration is on the cell. If anything, she could speak directly to how the vaccine gets to the cell and not the nucleus of the cell, but she stayed away from all of that. Her whole argument was to get to be anti-mandate. So they use people like that to put them in front of you, distract you from the real information, and then have you buy into it because this microbiologist whose concentration is on cells and not immunology, virology, or epidemiology, and then they play you with that and you buy it. So that had to be in a book, it had to be addressed, and you had to deal with it because a lot of pseudoisms capture the minds very easily, and they promote it in a way that actually takes advantage of people's ignorance. And then we succumb to a trap, and then you end up with 100 million unvaccinated people complaining about all these different variants that are occurring and emerging in our society today. And part of that is because we don't have 90% vaccination rate. Had 90% of the people been vaccinated, we don't get to, I'm just going to throw it out there. We don't get to Omicron, so to say. You know, we might get to something, but it wouldn't be at that level. Delta wouldn't be as severe as it is because it wouldn't find a viable host to survive.
Well, Dr. Cole said from the beginning about the shutdown. Well, I'm not going to speak for Dr. Cole, but again, one more time, could you just go over what you said about what you felt that we should have done about the shutdown and how that would have resulted differently? Okay, and you're on mute.
Pretty much the pandemic started about March 2020, and what we should have done was close down the schools, have everybody stay home, have the political will. We have enough money, I say, to pay people to stay at home. And if we had done that about 3 or 4 months, obviously, not going to work, trying not to be in crowds and groups, weddings, funerals. Those are the big super spreader events now. Gender reveal parties, baby showers, you know, all the stuff that big sporting events, school, all these things that people they just insist that they're going to try and get through this pandemic trying to do these things is not going to work. But if we had done that for about 3 or 4 months, we would have been able to contain the transmission of the virus. This virus goes from person to person to person. But if you stay out of groups where there are other people, you shut down the virus's ability to go from one person to another person, being spread by respiratory droplets and aerosol, which means even though the person who's infected is not standing right there, it's still aerosol. And so that's where people had a problem with going to wearing the mask when we first were told we didn't have to wear masks, because when they figured out the transmission was different than we initially thought, people just got a little ruffled by that. But if we had really hunkered down for about 3 or 4 months, I think we would have been a lot further off. And one thing I like to add is that if you read about the Spanish flu pandemic 102 years ago, I guess now 103 years ago, what we are doing now is the exact same thing we did 102 years ago on steroids because we have the internet. But it's so discouraging that human behavior and how we respond to the situation has not changed in 100 years. It's like we didn't learn anything.
I completely.
You sent me back when this first started. You sent me some information on what occurred during the the Spanish flu, and you were saying, this is what they did. This needs to be what we're doing right now, and here's the basic problem.
Okay, what I sent you is what a friend of mine sent me, who's a physician currently practicing in Cleveland. It was a copy of the Cleveland Health Department statement of how they were shutting down restaurants, and I think they had the word speakeasies on there, public baths, and it's the same thing that we were trying to get people to do in early 2020. It was so amazing to read this original document dated 100 plus 100 and some change years ago. It's like, didn't I just read this in a newspaper yesterday? So it's just human behavior is just, we're not gonna make it.
We're gonna close out with breakthrough, because let me tell you, because I wanted to, Shawn, talk to you about Judy Moskowitz, but we're gonna go past that. And part of the problem is because we know that we're not scientifically and medically literate. We don't understand how vaccines work. So we follow misinformation about what we think they're supposed to do. So when you have breakthrough, especially when we're having them during Delta, was one thing. But the amount of breakthrough cases now with Omicron obviously are a lot higher. And people seem to think, and they use it as a reason, again, not to get vaccinated. If I know all these people who are vaccinated and they're still getting COVID, then why should I do it? Shawn, I feel funny to ask you to tell us about breakthrough cases when we have Dr. Coe here, but I want you to talk to us from a perspective of the excuse of what people don't understand.
Yeah, so if you vaccinate enough people in a community, at some point you're only going to be able to measure those who were previously vaccinated. So as the numbers grow or grew during the pandemic, more people being vaccinated, the likelihood of breakthrough infections increased. But here's the thing, scientists can argue over the word breakthrough. There's a virologist, Vince Racaniello, and I kind of agree with his perspective that breakthrough is an incorrect word, because you never stop a disease. Well, a virus never stops attacking us. It never stops. They just don't disappear. These viruses continue to attack the body until it can find a cell that it could actually infiltrate and then handle its business. That is what viruses do. The thing is how protected are you with your vaccine? You've heard Dr. Cole mention this earlier about, these, bouts with, Omicron, if you got your third shot, second shot, so, so on and so forth, right? We've heard us say that. So what we're up against now is infection versus disease in the vaccinated group, because you still have, and the people who previously had an infection, so the reinfections. How much of the infection is causing disease or symptoms or whatever, and how is it transmitting, and all of that stuff, all the confusing things that people don't want to pay attention to. So now, if I'm vaccinated and Delta didn't break through as much as Omicron, Alpha didn't break through as much as Omicron, Beta didn't break through as much as Omicron. The ancestral strand, D614G, which has no name, didn't break through as much as Omicron. Why is Omicron so infectious? Because we don't understand evolution. Viruses adapt and mutate. They're going to find a viable host, replicate, duplicate, and then continue its process. They're dead. They're trying to survive. They're not alive. They're trying to survive. They need a host to survive and replicate in, to make copies of itself and come out different than it went in. Omicron has mutations at major sites in the spike, which allows it to evade the protection that we had against the previous infection. The previous variants. If we just understood that, we can understand that we will succumb to a breakthrough. When we succumb to a breakthrough, now it's how much of our vaccine is protecting us against the spread of infectious disease, because the vaccines was tested, right? During these trials, they were tested to do that, to stop the spread of infectious disease, hospitalizations, and death. What we found out is Omicron was infectious, but it wasn't as severe as Delta. And the hospitalizations is around 92%, still a high number. Deaths have stabilized. We're only seeing deaths in the bigger portion of the unvaccinated people, and maybe, that small 0.02% that succumb to a breakthrough, that have comorbidities or one or more diseases that's going on. You're dealing with that. So that's what we're dealing with now. So we think, because they publicized, the media has publicized breakthrough, that, oh man, now everybody getting it, everybody gonna die and all of this. No. You still have, whether you've had 2 shots or 3 shots, you're better protected at 3 shots from, and Dr. Cole can correct me, but if you got 2 shots and a booster shot, right? 2 shots and a booster shot, that booster is better protecting against that, that initial breakthrough. It does a better job at protecting you versus that. That is what the booster is there to do. It is to boost your antibody level, to raise that protection level. However, we also have science that says that Omicron can evade our T cells. So our T cell, which is another part of your protection level, or when you're talking about immunity, that helps you in other fights. So it goes back to understanding your immune system. It helps us advance the conversation, but the media has our focus and attention on the actual wrong thing. We should just be focused on the breakthroughs, how severe. Scientists, they don't care about the infection. They want to know how many of these people are ending up in a hospital and are going through severe experiences.
Well, Shawn, I think part of the issue from the beginning was we thought, I didn't think, but the population thought that the vaccine was promoted as a cure or 100% protection from infection is part of the problem.
Nah.
That was our fault. That's the advertising that we did, right? Take the shot and end this all. I wish, I'm putting my wish list here for you, that we do a show about what we have learned. So in 102 years, maybe we have a manual of what not to repeat, because this will happen again. But I think we have made so many gross mistakes, right? Like the 2-week flat curve campaign. That was a terrible mistake. We should have never promised 2 weeks flat the curve. And all the promotions that we did around the vaccine early on was like this promise of, we will stop talking about it if you just get it.
Right.
If you just get it, we will We promise that you're saving your life and you're saving others' life, and we will come back to normal. We're literally printing billboards say, let's go back to normal, get the shot. That was infantile of us. That was condescending to treat the population that way, even knowing that the intention was good. The oversimplification have hurt us through this process.
Right. And what we should be learning, as Dr. Cole said, and I have this book, it says Stopping the Next Pandemic. And it's how COVID-19 can help us save humanity. We should actually be learning, and Marielle just said, we're gonna have, and Shawn said, we're gonna go through this again. And just like Dr. Cole said, what we should have learned back in 102 years ago, and what Marielle just said, we should document what we didn't learn, what we should have learned. We should also be paying attention what we need to be learning right now for what comes next.
I, for example, believe the way that we roll out the vaccines was completely immoral and unethical. We have all the vaccines from day one. We never have a shortage. It was not a reason to do it the way that we did it by age. It would have been 100 way more logistical ways that we could have done rolled out the vaccine that would have guaranteed better outcomes. We should have never repeat that pattern of behavior with rollouts.
All right, Shawn, take us out. What do we need to know over the last 2 shows plus shows that we've done? We've disputed hoaxes. Dr. Cole has given us ad nauseum the fact that a leaf, an herb, some alkaline water is not going to create an immune response against a novel virus. No matter how much we keep talking about that, it's hard to combat the herbalists and the natural healers. They still think that whatever this nice new natural whatever is going to stop it, and despite the science that keeps telling you otherwise, that's not going anywhere. But Shawn, take us out with what we should know. What should, and I know Marielle wants to know, what can we tell people? What can we do? How can we make change of the people that are the remaining people who either are just dug in, and in addition to thinking about that, I want to know, Dr. Cole and Shawn, are there people out there who were saying, no, I'm never going to do this, I'm not going to do it? Are there people out there who've actually gotten vaccinated, but still out here being anti-vax? Because that's real despicable if that's occurring. But it's been suggested that it is.
So you mean people who have gotten vaccinated but are still telling other people not to get vaccinated?
Yes, but people who were previously saying, don't get vaccinated, I'm not for that, it's wrong for X, Y, Z crazy reason, and probably because they saw it getting close up on them or relatives or loved ones, and then they got vaccinated, maybe even through mandates, but for whatever reason they got vaccinated, and benefiting from it.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of prominent politicians did that in the beginning. I mean, we all know. I'm too tired to be political right now, but a lot of the federal government, state governors, yeah, all of them, even though they were anti-vax, anti-mandate, anti-mask, a lot of them were vaccinated.
Hey, Shawn, is Rizza Islam vaccinated?
Man, I don't want to lie to you about Rizza Islam, but I would assume that in order for him to go around and do the things that he actually do, that he would be the type that would deceive people intentionally and be vaccinated. A lot of the, a lot of what we hear about, like the Kennedys, they had a Christmas party, but what was the requirement? You had to be tested. You had to have a negative test, a recent negative test to come to the party, or you had to have your vaccination card. And this is from the leading anti-vaccine vaccine advocate in the United States. And he then says, well, that was one of my wife's rules. So he's vaccinated, right? Because she wasn't playing, and of course he's going to get vaccinated. So my whole thing is that for the remaining people that really need to take something away from it, is that we don't trust people. We trust the science. The science is where the positions are held. The questions are answered. It's all right. The data is right there for us to extract it. Now that we know that, is the vaccine for us? The answer would be absolutely. Where's the data to support that? Well, because of the vaccine rollout, we curbed about 250,000 more deaths. I still think the 834,000 deaths that we have is an under account. And many scientists agree with that, because a lot of them are proponents of the undercount earlier on during the pandemic, because they didn't know how to classify what was transpiring. They ain't know. They just simply didn't know until March, when somebody wanted to come out and basically say, oh yeah, well, it's a pandemic, at the time. So what I want people to know is the vaccine is saving lives. It is preventing hospitalizations and deaths. That is exactly what we needed to do. Even through waning protection, after your 20 weeks, 25 weeks, whatever the science says, you still have some level of protection. So they want you to get boosted to increase your antibody levels. They haven't set a vaccine schedule yet, but one will come down the pipeline once they've uncovered more data. And as far as the vaccine side effects, they're no different than anything else you've ever experienced in your life. Most of them are exaggerated. And no, catching COVID is not better than being vaccinated. Right? So I would love for everyone to know those things and understand what a virus is, how a virus behaves, how it attacks our bodies, and how our immune systems function, and what our immune system is. What is the main defense, and what is the other levels of defenses that come behind the main defenses. So if we can get that, we can educate people on dealing with that. I believe that we will have more proponents of being vaccinated, because then they'll understand the vaccine science and they'll protect themselves, their families, their neighborhoods, our communities, and me when I want to travel.
Mm. All right, Dr. Cole, anything other than you mad that I still had you on here for all this time? And you on mute.
I'm multitasking.
Okay.
Get vaccinated, get the booster. I'm seeing a lot of breakthrough infections for people who don't have the booster, and it's overdue for them to get the booster. It should be 5 months after the Pfizer vaccine, 6 months after Moderna, and after Johnson and Johnson. I can't remember the time period. Ask your doctor. I think sometimes people who are swirling around in the pseudoscience, a lot of times those people do not have a primary care physician that they already have a rapport with. And I think that's very important. There are a lot of people who go to work every day. They have benefits. They have access to a doctor. It's not just about not having access to a doctor, especially now with the federal changes that we've had. A lot of people who have access to a doctor that they can ask questions to, but some people still choose not to choose a primary care doctor. So a lot of times, it's hard to get in to have a primary care doctor a lot of times, depending on where you live. But if you have somebody that you've already established care with, you can call, you can send a patient portal message, get in, do a video visit now. It's that has helped us have much more access to our patients. Video visits, you could do that on your phone. Most people have a smartphone, or a family member that has a smartphone for areas that don't have great broadband. So it's a lot better than it used to be. But still, a lot of those people who are swirling in the pseudoscience, as you guys say, it's not that they can't access a doctor. They don't want to deal with that aspect of life. But having a doctor is actually the best way to get the answers to your questions as it pertains to you as an individual and your individual medical issues, which you
Okay.
can't get from Dr. Google.
Mary Ellie, and I just want you to know that I've been trained well by my doctors. As you know, my primary care physician, Dr. Gregory Hall, who introduced me to you guys, is very instrumental in me being able to do the work that I do. But Mary Ellie, I want you to know that my primary care doctor prior to Dr. Hall was Dr. Bonita Coe.
Oh, we can ask her the secrets. She holds it.
She's by HIPAA. She can't. So Dr. Hall, and prior to that, Dr. Coe was my personal care physician. Mary Ellie, we still have work to do.
We do.
You and I, and our team, our squad. We still have a lot of work to do, and I appreciate the tirelessness that you do. For one, putting up with me.
Please. Because I love your mom, that's why.
And you were fussing at me last week all throughout shooting a couple.
You guys don't know what this man put me through it. You guys have no idea. It's
you shot some spots, and Mary Ellie was like, "Man, come on, chill. You're giving me a hard time." But I appreciate her putting up with me.
Thank you so much for tonight. And I am so fired up about the validation that these two masterminds have given us tonight over work. I almost feel like I need to call the whole staff and make them work tomorrow, Saturday. Because it's so good and it's so urgent and it's so many mistakes, and the money is there, the resources are there. It's immoral that we have not done better through this pandemic, and it's immoral if we repeat it.
Okay, guys, everybody that's watching or will be watching, once I get it to where everybody was supposed to be at, Shawn's book, you see it right here, What SARS-CoV-2 Taught Me. This is done in a way that regular people can understand it. But he provides sources if they so choose not to believe what he has written. If they want to go search for themselves, he's done an excellent job in providing those sources. Watch Shawn on Science with Shawn. You can catch up on all, you can go to his Science with Shawn YouTube channel and catch up on all of the back information. And it will be a benefit to you. Trust me. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Shawn, bruh, we wouldn't be doing the show right now if you didn't walk me through getting this back on. I don't know what in the world is wrong with my computer, but good thing my wife walked in and Dr. Janice was able to pull out her laptop and get me cracking. But you must have done that before, Shawn, walk some people through the process.
Hey man, that's all I know how to do, man. Try to
All
walk
right.
people from A to B. If they just listen, when we talked about the vaccine, it's a similar process. A to B. You know, we have every right in this world to make sure that we get the vaccine. It's not a shot. I'm tired of hearing a shot. Did you get the shot? I hate that. When people say that, I hate that. It's a vaccine. It's not a shot. The vaccine works. It works. Can't emphasize that enough. You're not going to develop a third lung, an extra kidney, and third eye, none of that. You know, they're not chipping you, none of that. Get it out of here. You know, if you get the book, you'll see where a lot of those claims come from in that chapter that we discussed.
All right. In closing, one of these books that I have behind me says, in every movie, and I'm paraphrasing now, in every movie where there was a calamity, where people had all kinds of diseases and dystopian troubles, it all starts out with people not listening to the scientists. I don't know which book that is, but it's in one of these books. Thank you guys for being on here. I'm going to work to get this over where this is shareable, get over to my YouTube channel. Well, this is my YouTube channel, but one that I don't actually use that often. But thank you all, and we'll talk. Dr. Cole, appreciate you. Shawn, you already know what it is. Marielle, we still got a whole lot of work to do in the land. Thank you guys. We're gone. Give my wife back her computer.